Welcome back to Financial Focus Radio. Thanks for joining us. My name is Tyler Simones. That is Josh Fenili. We are partners at Northwest Quadrant Wealth Management here in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We appreciate you spending some time with us this weekend. You know, one of the things that, well, I don't know, I know you don't care, but Major League Baseball started again last week, and the NBA came back too, which was good to see. And so live sports for me is, I didn't realize how much I liked it until it went away. But I will say this, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I think, one of the things I really want to have happen more than anything, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it happen, is my kids to go back to school. Kids around the country, colleges and high schools and elementary, I just feel like it's so vitally important. And I'm not here to argue whether they should go back or not. I just want the circumstances to be such that they can go back, whatever that means. And I'm not going to try to push water uphill because I'm just not into doing that. But I think a good place to look is at these professional sports organizations. So the NBA, we're not going to send everybody to Disney World, right? And have that be what school looks like. But Major League Baseball, they are a much bigger roster. Their rosters are huge, especially right now. They allow them to have more players. They have tons of trainers and coaches and people that travel with them. So the entourage that travels with a Major League Baseball team is quite large. And they're traveling from city to city to play, and they play each other, and there's times when they're very close together, especially around the plate. And so, we saw Miami Marlins have a big breakout, and then they played Phillies, and then they had a breakout. But how Major League Baseball deals with this going forward, and if they are able to have their season and have it come off relatively successfully, I think can be a good model for schools. And coming up with some sort of solution so that kids can go back to school. Because as it stands now here in most of the state of Oregon, kids aren't going back to school in person in the fall, and that makes me want to cry. But it is what it is. And so I think that whatever it takes, if everybody needs to wear a mask, you got to get off this don't tell me what to do thing and just do what's good for the greater good of our population. And so I think Major League Baseball and how that plays out can be a good example.
I'm desperate for college football.
Right? The Ducks were going to play Ohio State. That's not happening.
What a bummer.
Yeah. SEC's still firing up, though. Speaking of college football, the pandemic has had quite an impact and will have quite an impact. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But there are 65 Power 5 schools in the country, and their estimation is that they're going to lose $4 billion in football revenue if football doesn't happen this year. Public school Power 5 athletic departments, on average, made nearly half of their total operating revenue from football, with 14% coming from ticket sales alone, and obviously the rest comes from TV sales. And anywhere from 75 up to almost 85% of all revenue to our departments are derived directly or indirectly from football, and that's according to the Oregon State Athletic Director Scott Barnes. And so, it doesn't matter what you think about college football. People think, these coaches, it's crazy how much money they make, and it isn't crazy because of the economics around college football. But if college football doesn't happen, what that means for these universities, especially all of their sports programs, is they get decimated.
Well, and I mean, there's been this investment theme playing out over the past few years, which is winner take all, and this pandemic has accentuated that in almost every aspect of life, because it's all of those mid-major football teams to get paid to go lose the game to the Power 5 school. That's a big chunk of their budget. None of them are going to have that this year. What are they going to do?
They're going to cut all
they're
the
not
other
gonna,
sports.
There's going to be a lot less than 126 Division I college football teams anymore.
Forgetting sports, if they don't have kids go back to school and pay those tuitions, I don't know, universities are going to struggle mightily. I mean, there's going to be a big, I think, bunch of universities that go away.
And worse, from the perspective of the kids, those 4 years are, essentially some of the best 4 years of their life, and they're losing maybe one or and
in the scheme of their total life, it's a big percentage.
Yeah, it probably feels like a very, very long time in their eyes.
All right, let's kick off our shame of the week. And we've done this before, but I want to bring it up because I think I want to protect our listeners, our listeners, from this and getting caught up in this. So it's two things. One is the Department of Labor the shame is on the Department of Labor for allowing private equity to be added to 401k plans. And then secondly, the private equity firms inflating their return numbers that they're publishing over time. So those two things have been happening. One is that private equity, because there is no market for private equity. I should first explain what private equity is. So public markets are, stocks like Microsoft that trade. Those are public markets, public equities. Then there's private equities, which outside investors can own. Historically, you've had to be accredited, so either institutional or high net worth person to own private equities. But there is outside investors, a lot of outside investors that own these privately traded, or they don't really trade, but private stocks. So there's no market. So the price that these companies come up with is every time they have a funding round, there's a price that is determined for the overall business. But there's a valuation that oftentimes is done by supposedly an outside auditor that comes up with some valuation of the business, and that's what is published. And so that can be fudged dramatically. The price of Microsoft is the price of Microsoft, and that can't be changed. It is what it is. So private equity has inflated their published returns, especially in declining markets, because they don't have a price that they can say this is the price, and so they sort of come up with this fudged price that they determine for the stock.
And their calculation of IRR, then the weightings and the flows, mathematically it gets complex, but they're essentially able to misrepresent returns over a longer time horizon just by using numbers that they derived from early within the investment cycle.
And so the story goes that, look at how good private equity returns have been. Individual retail investors haven't had access to that market. We need to democratize that market and give them access to it in 1940 Act mutual funds that now end up in 401k plans. So the Department of Labor made it so that these things could be added to 401k plans. Most all of the outperformance from private equity came early in private equities, in the beginning stages when there was a very small amount of money in private equity. So if you look at Yale was one of the founding, we have a big allocation of our endowment to private equity. It was when the private equity universe was tiny. And so there was tons of mispriced stuff out there that you could put money into and make a bunch of money. And most of private equity returns come from very small companies. And so now tons of money has flowed to that space. Anytime you have a lot of money go to any space from an investment perspective, it dilutes returns.
Expected
and that's what
returns
we've seen.
Come down.
And so that's what we've seen. And now at the worst possible time, they're going to add more money and adding retail money. So all of you out there listening, they're going to add your money to the mix for further diluting returns. So the problem we have is that expected returns for private equity going forward, because there's so much money there, are going to be really abysmal. And the fees are really high.
And if you're an Oregon taxpayer, a lot of your tax dollars are just being funneled to these firms, essentially.
But the worst part for you is the fees are really high. So not only are you going to most likely underperform, your fees you're going to be paying are really, really high. And so, it's really a bummer. It's a shame on the Department of Labor for caving into the lobby that allowed this. And then it's also a shame for how the accounting rules are around private equity to report numbers that probably aren't actually correct. They're probably inflated. And so if you are one of our listeners, we're telling you this is the shame of the week, to stay away from private equity in your 401k.
And big picture level, it's not the government's job, I think, ultimately to, decide who's a winner here, but these people don't have skin in the game. They're just using other people's money.
Yeah, 100%. All right, if you want to be part of the show, give us a call, 877-670-7117, or go to our website, financialfocusradio.com, and send us an email. When we come back, we're going to do Financial Focus University, how to determine the right asset allocation for you. So stick around.
Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Northwest Quadrant Wealth Management, a registered investment advisor and separate entity from LPL Financial.